So, as most of you probably know, some time ago I made a video rewriting Food Fight's backstory, and even though as of writing this video that one isn't even out, I really want to do this again. I still cannot express how rejuvenating writing these backstories actually have been for the channel because I really love doing these. But once again, I came to the dilemma of who I should really talk about this time around since I have like 180 plus Skylanders I can revamp. Because of this, I decided that I would build upon a good backstory this time around instead of fixing a bad one, and to fit with the somewhat opposite tone, I decided that I would go and edit the Undead Skylanders backstory, and to my surprise, most of them have some really good backstories, but I eventually boiled my position down to two Skylanders, Brawl and Roller Brawl. Brawl has one of the best Skylander backstories in my eyes, especially when it comes to the Giants as a whole, and even though I really want to rewrite his backstory to make it even better than it already is, I decided to choose Roller Brawl instead because if I screw up his rewrite, I will never hear the end of it. Roller Brawl has always been a really interesting character to me because her backstory was not only really interesting on a conceptual level, but she also made multiple appearances outside of the games themselves in annuals and even got her own comic that wrapped up her story in one of the best ways possible. Roller Brawl is also clearly a fan favorite as well, so before we hop in and begin to change things, let's go over the rules. Firstly, I can't just make up a completely different backstory that has absolutely nothing to do with the original. I actually need to use the plot points and ideas within that story to craft the rewrite, and I cannot cut things out unless absolutely necessary. Secondly, if the backstory does not directly state it, I have to tell you how that Skylander became a Skylander, so no ending the story without explaining that or at least throwing in a line about it. Thirdly, I need to talk about the character's original backstory beforehand and then get into the character's rewritten backstory so the viewer has context, and fourthly, I need to account for that character's personality or create that personality while I'm making the rewritten story to make it as best as I possibly can for that character. So with all the rules set in stone, let's get started.
Let's roll!
Now, before we get into the rewrite, it's best that we get into Roller Brawl's original backstory so we can see what makes it a really good one. Now, Roller Brawl is actually the youngest of 6 vampire siblings, the other 5 being her older vampiric brothers who were very overprotective of her because she was the tiniest in the family. But because of her height, she learned how to use her cunning to become one of the best jammers in the Undead Roller Derby League, and during her championship match, she would have a run-in with Chaos, and Chaos was head over heels in love with her, and decided to bombard her with a ton of unwanted gifts. Once her brothers caught wind of this, however, they would go and confront Chaos and tell him to piss off, and in response, he would hire an army of Drow and have them kidnapped. When Roller Brawl learned about this, she was obviously enraged and swore revenge on Chaos for his nonsense, but her skills were not enough to match the entire Drow army, and after developing a strong distaste for evil from this incident, she joined the Skylanders to take the fight to him. Now, all in all, this is a pretty good backstory, and there's nothing in here that really needs fixing. In fact, this is a case where everything just needs a lot more expanding upon, especially with a few bits near the end. So with that said and done, let's get rocking. Before Roller Brawl became a Skyland-spanning name, before she was even born in fact, Roller Brawl's family were seen as the average group of vampires who lived in a small town deep within the underworld. They were known in town for being the hardest working group of vampires around, harvesting the chilling fright fruits from bamboo-like stalks that help the family make the money they need to keep everything on the up and up. So when Roller Brawl, the youngest member of her family, was born, she was absolutely adored by her brothers, and even though they saw her small height as one of her cutest features, Roller Brawl absolutely hated it. As she grew up, Roller Brawl began to look up to her older brothers and wanted to do everything that they could, but when it came to the farming lifestyle that they had lived, she would struggle a lot. She couldn't carry as much, struggled to pull the fright fruits from their branches, and the branches that her brothers could easily reach at 5, she was struggling to reach at 10. Even though Roller Brawl had difficulties in all of these areas, she refused to give up whatsoever. But as she grew older and her brother's sword passed her, she realized that she would need to use everything at her disposal to keep up. And one night, she would get an idea. In her pastime, Roller Brawl skated throughout her town and the nearby islands, much to her brother's worry, but she was known throughout the town because because of how often and quickly she blitzed through it. So the next day, when they went out to harvest more fright fruits, Roller Brawl would use her skates to zip through the field and snatch up as many fruits as she could. And by the time she was an adult, she got to the point where she could harvest just as many fright fruits as her brothers, and sometimes even more. But things have gotten rather boring since the challenge was gone. But that didn't mean she slacked off, as she continued to hold the title of one of the hardest working siblings in her family, right behind her eldest brother. But one day, after working the field once more, the youngest of her brothers suggested something that would change her and her family's lives forever. Even though he doted on Roller Brawl like her other siblings, Raptor always had a feeling that she was destined for more, so he would suggest that she go into the Roller Derby League, and wanting to prove herself even more, and seeing the amount it paid, she would leave her days of farming behind her and join the Roller Derby League, and she would completely change the sport. She was not only one of the top jammers in the league, but she was also one of the most cunning and agile, performing techniques that even seasoned veterans struggle to pull off consistently, and after she had won her third consecutive championship in a row, she would catch the attention of the Dark Portal Master known as Chaos. Now, at the time, Chaos was facing a bit of a crisis, and that crisis was finding a special someone, but don't get things twisted because it was never about love. At first. See, Chaos wanted to become the ruler of all of Skylands, but for a brief time, he thought that he needed a spouse to legitimize his rule, or at least make it look legit. But after a month, he kinda just gave up and settled with finding a competent second in command. This would eventually lead him to spectating one of the matches in the Roller Derby League, and when he saw Roller Brawl, he fell head over heels for her, and with that, he decided that he was going to merge his plans together, and simp like never seen before. Now, originally, he was just going to send one of his minions to give her presents from him until she wanted to meet him, but he didn't want to risk said goon taking the credit, so he decided that for the moment, he would become the goon. For months, he would give her gift after gift after gift. It doesn't matter if they were face to face, across Skylands, or if she told him to stop several times. Chaos would somehow figure out how to gift her so many presents that the stalking began to affect her games, to the point that she actually lost a match, and when her brothers learned about this, they were out for blood. Knowing how much this affected their sister, they decided to keep an eye out for Chaos during her next match, and when they did spot him entering the arena, present in hand, they immediately took action, stopping him from reaching their sister and threatening that if he tried this again, he would have to deal with them. Knowing that he couldn't take 5 vampires on all by himself, he backed down, but he wouldn't take any of this lightly, because in his mind, they stood between him and his true love. When Roller Brawl finally finished her match, she would go out to find her brothers, only to notice that they were nowhere to be found, and after searching for them for a long while, she would spot a large group of Drow hauling them away, Chaos taunting them the whole time. Enraged, Roller Brawl would bolt towards Chaos, only to be stopped by his group of Drow, and while she fought against the Drow harder than she ever had against anyone in the ring, Chaos would kidnap her brothers and flee the area on his ship. Once the fight was over, Roller Brawl would realize what happened and swore to not only rescue her brothers, but get revenge on Chaos for everything he had put her through. But the question now was how. She had no idea where Chaos had taken them, and even if she had a way to track him, she could barely win a fight against a handful of his Drow. How would she handle hundreds upon hundreds of Drow that Chaos had in his possession? And at that, she remembered something. The Skylanders. They had fought Chaos multiple times now, and they had won almost every single time. And with their help, she could not only track Chaos, but also get the help that she needed to rescue her brothers. And with that, she would set off and eventually join the Skylanders. And even though she was now a hero who protected Skylands from evil, she would continue to keep an eye out for her brothers, knowing that they were out there somewhere, and that she would eventually find them. And with that said and done, this is where the rewrite comes to an end. Now, before we go, I want to apologize for how rushed this ending is compared to Food Fights. Simply put, I screwed up my schedule, and because of that, I needed to wrap things up, so you know, I actually have a video for this week. But outside of that, I still had a ton of fun writing this, and I would like to thank you all for watching. Like always, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy content like this, share this around so I can grow the channel, leave some comments down below to make the algorithm happy, check out Return to Skylands along with the Discord and the music link down in the description below, and I will see you all in the next one.